At one point this weekend, you said that Bitcoin, and this was basically, you were asked, Charlie said Bitcoin's like rat poison. You were asked about that comment, and you said, well, it's probably more like rat poison squared. Charlie went on in the meeting to then basically call Bitcoin turds.
He is an expressive sort, isn't he? Maybe when he gets a little older, he'll mature.
I just want to ask you about that because it sparks so much controversy. And what is it about Bitcoin that gets you guys so fired up?
Well, when you buy a farm, you look at the crop every year and what prices are, and you decide whether it was a satisfactory investment. I mean, you look to the asset itself and what it produces for you. When we buy a business, we look at what the business earns and decide how we feel about it in terms of what we paid. But we are buying something that at the end of the period, we not only have what we bought in the first place, but we have something that the asset produced. And when you buy non-productive assets, all you're counting on is whether the next person is going to pay you more because they're even more excited about another next person coming along. But the asset itself is creating nothing. One of the interesting things, for example, is gold. If you go back to the time of Christ and you look at how many hours of labor you had to give up in order to buy an ounce of gold, and you take it forward to now, you'll find the compound rate maybe 1/10 or 0.2%. You know, and then you have to insure it during that time and make sure somebody doesn't steal it from you and everything. But it doesn't produce anything. And productive assets, you can pay too much for a productive asset. But I bought a farm in the 1980s, and every year look at how much it produced the way of soybeans and corn. And at the end of that period, I've still got the farm, and I've gotten some significant income off of it. Apartment house, operating business. But if you and I buy various cryptocurrencies, they're not going to multiply. They're not going to be a bunch of rabbits sitting there in front of us. They're just going to sit there. And I got to hope next time you get more excited after I bought it from you, and then maybe I'll get more excited and buy it from you. And actually, we could sit in the house by ourselves, and we could keep running up the price between the two of us. But at the end of the time, there's one Bitcoin sitting there, and now we got to find somebody else. And they come to an end. I mean, those.
That's a greater fool theory. That's what you're saying.
Well, yeah, it's buying something because you expect the pool of people who want to buy it because they want to sell it to somebody else will grow, and it's wonderful because it does create a rising price. Does create more buyers, and people think I've got to get in on this, and it's better if they don't understand it. That's the other thing about non-productive. If you don't understand it, you get much more excited than if you understand it. I mean, if you buy a bond that says it's going to pay you 4% a year, you're not going to get any pleasant surprises. She's going to pay you 4% a year. But if you can have anything you want to imagine, if you just look at something and say that's magic, you can do it with shark's teeth or seashells or anything. And they did it with tulips in the 17th century in Amsterdam, and they'll do it again. I mean, people, they like to speculate. They like to gamble. And if you can get something, particularly if you have something half plausible going on. Mm-hmm. If you had bought gold in 1942 and you say, we might lose the war and we might have to run off to some other country, and so let's put our assets in gold, you would have less than a penny for every dollar you got from owning stocks. Less than a penny. Now, if somebody calls that a store of value, I mean, I think they're delusionary.
Okay. Andrew has a question, too. Andrew.
Hey, Warren, related to this issue of Bitcoin, you saw that Goldman Sachs just last week announced that they were going to create effectively a trading operation around cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in particular. You've been an investor in Goldman. What do you think of their decision to do that?
Well, they probably think that lots of people are going to get very excited about it. Well, and maybe already are, but they think there's money to be made trading them. I don't think they're expressing an opinion on the ultimate value. I would be very surprised if the top partners of Goldman are selling their Goldman stock and putting it into Bitcoin. But I want to cover this subject now because my friend Charlie will come on at 8 o'clock and he'll tell him what he will say.
Well, that's my whole entire point. I do want to ask Charlie about it because I think when he talked about the turds, he was referring to this. He said if you're trading this, it's like watching other people trading turds and deciding you want to get a piece of that.
Well, you're not going to get me to comment on that.
Hopefully Charlie's not awake and
Well,
not
the
watching
truth is
right
people
now.
do trade on very crazy things over time. Imagine people selling their homes to buy a tulip in Amsterdam. If people think they're going to make money the next day, and worse yet, if they think somebody else that they know is going to make money and they aren't going to make money, it just draws people in. I could whisper something on this program, and kind of the more sillier it was, the more it might react, because there's no quantitative limits. If you buy a stock, you say, well, I'll buy it at 15 times earnings, but I won't buy it at 20 times earnings. But when you get into something that doesn't produce anything, there's no checkpoints. There's nothing to reference it to. It's gone up, so it'll keep going.
Now, I will say,
Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold, which, if it succeeded, would facilitate a lot of illicit activity. Now, that is not something I think the world needs. And the fact that it's clever computer science doesn't mean that it should be widely used and that respectable people should encourage other people to speculate in it. Bitcoin reminds me of Oscar Wilde's definition of fox hunting, the pursuit of the uneatable by the unspeakable.
Well, that sounds better than what I used before.
we asked earlier, Charlie, Andrew brought it up with Warren, but
I think it's a scumball activity. Does that serve you better?
thank you. Yeah, we asked earlier about Goldman Sachs getting into the business of having a trading desk for Bitcoin. Berkshire Hathaway owns about $2.5 billion of Goldman Sachs. Does it bother you, or does it not surprise you?
Well, I don't expect every investment bank to agree with everything I think. They have a lot of animal spirits in investment banking.
Bill, Charlie and Warren have weighed in on Bitcoin. Do you own any?
Somebody gave me some for my birthday, and then a few years later I thought, hey, I'm going to sell that. So no. There's some really good technology in terms of sharing databases and verifying transactions that is talked about as blockchain. That is a good thing. Bitcoin and ICOs, I agree completely. It's one of the crazier speculative things where it's not, as an asset class, you're not producing anything. And so you shouldn't expect it to go up. It's kind of a pure greater fool theory type investment. So, I agree. I would short it if there was an easy way to do it.
One of the interesting things, if people react when you criticize their investment, if they get mad, they're gambling. If somebody criticizes Apple or Berkshire, we like it. I mean, if the stock goes down, we'll buy more of it because we don't care whether it's just we don't feel that it has anything to do with it. But if we criticize something that they own because they only want it to go up tomorrow, they feel we are hurting them, and therefore they get very upset about it. If they really like what they own, what difference would it make? If I criticize their wife or something, they don't get all upset about it.
Wait a minute. That's a bad habit.
Yeah, probably not the perfect example to use.
And here we have, if you're right about Bitcoin, something that's now lasted something along the lines of 15 years. And so I've been trying to understand if, in fact, you're right, and this is not just rat poison squared, but is not a thing, when it would be unveiled as not a thing.
That's predicting when speculation will end, or when the gambling instinct will go away, and when more people want to get out than are getting in. And I have no way of. If I thought I was good at that, I'd figure out a way to make a lot of money in different things. All I'm trying to do is buy good businesses. But the one thing I know is I didn't like chain letters when I was a kid. I thought, why in the world should I send along a chain letter to the next guy when I could start my own? I mean, I've seen people do stupid things all my life, and I really empathize with that. I mean, people like to play the lottery. They're going to get 60 cents back on the dollar or whatever the number may be, and states essentially the numbers racket was something that you avoided, and then the government decided it was a source of revenue, and it's very hard to tell people that if they're going to put a tax on essentially a sure loser for society, for the gamblers on the lottery on the whole, but they're appealing to the gambling instinct, and it spreads. I mean, people love the idea they're going to make more money tomorrow, and it really drives them crazy if their next door neighbor is making a lot of money not knowing what they're doing, and they're just sitting there, and their spouse is saying, why is that guy getting a second car, and why are we missing this whole thing? And the gambling instinct is so strong, and you had millions of people that were getting checks in the money and sitting home and finding out that they could have a roulette wheel in their house, and they had all the appeals of gambling that are used to get people to go to Las Vegas, and you can do it in your home, and they had money, and we've had an explosion of gambling essentially, and I like to bet on a football game if I'm sitting and watching. It makes it more interesting, but I don't think I want to make a living trying to bet against the house ever. I want to. If I were to get into gambling, I would want to own the roulette wheel and not be a roulette player. But we haven't done that. But people all the time. Well, actually, on my honeymoon, in my first marriage, we're talking when I was 21, and we went through Las Vegas population of about 20,000, a bunch of fellows from Omaha and other places that bought the Flamingo after Bugsy Signal met his maker sooner than he expected. And they welcomed me in because they all knew my Uncle Fred. And I looked at all these people who had flown thousands of miles to do something unintelligent as fast as they could. I mean, they couldn't, they thought the dice were hot or something like that. And I thought, I'm going to get rich in this country. I mean, if that's what people do, I can be smarter than that. I mean, so I've watched it ever since, and it's fascinating to me. But the gambling urge is so strong throughout the world, and now you've created the perfect condition for it, where states are legalizing gambling, and what it does to football games. I mean, particularly you're just point shaving, which. The guy gets offered $1 million, and it's like, the White Sox were back in 1920. They did it for a few $100s, and you aren't even throwing the game. I mean, you're just making sure that the spread is met. You're not going to change the gambling instinct, but when the state has started sponsoring it, it's given a different. There's a different climate than before.